The history of the Hale family runs deep through the veins of North Carolina, with each generation spreading their wings not far from the region's capital, and I am no different. We've lived in the mountains of Asheville, the salty air of Wilmington, the historical lands of Salem, and the tavern-laden streets of Raleigh. We've prided ourselves on education, spreading like the roots of an oak tree to all corners of academics until we earned a place in the annals of history, this state and beyond. We've acquired lands, built grandiose mansions, and of course laid brick after brick upon the foundation of an empire that has persisted for more than 100 years. Every generation before me brought piles of gold to the table while stuffing heaps of skeletons in their closets, and every Hale that's come and gone has carried a millstone of secrets upon their shoulders. Every Hale except one, that is. One of them aspired to something more than academics and provocative, decadent displays of wealth. My father. Yes, he was by all accounts a rich man. He was intelligent and educated as well, but he didn't carry opulence anywhere on his person or in his home. He didn't spend time acquiring temporary riches or gorging on the feasts of the luxurious. In fact, he did the opposite. He funded innumerable expeditions across the world and changed the field of archaeology, and history by extension, for generations to come. He created the Hale Institute of Supernatural Inquiry and wrote hundreds of papers on the subjects of spirits, the afterlife, Egypt, and the possibility of God. He spent more time traveling than he did working, and the majority of money he did generate went to humanitarian causes. Yes, my father was different. He was the first heartbeat in a lineage that had long since forgotten what it was like to live. I could spend hours talking about the stories he told me as I was growing up. When he wasn't on an adventure, he'd sit me down by the fireplace and read his daily journal entries one by one, and believe me, for a child, each one was a journey. In my head, I'd travel to the savannah and walk amongst the lions. I'd see the plains of Mongolia or step inside bear tracks as I hiked through the Arctic. I'd even smell the seaside villages of India, where ancient gods walked the shores at sunset. As I grew older, his writing evolved just as I did, and his adventures became less colorful, though equally as thrilling. He had sought mystics, religious zealots, soothsayers, magicians, practitioners of alchemy, and the greatest writers of his time because he had a desire smoldering in his chest. It grew into a roaring fire over the years, and as I reached adulthood, he only sought answers to the one question every person asked at some point in their life. What lies beyond the curtains of death? He traveled to sacred places in Israel, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, Rome, and Japan, and all the while he asked questions. He searched for the truth. Over time, he began connecting pieces of the puzzle, or so he claimed, and he would tell my mother that the universe was a ball of yarn waiting to be unraveled, and that he was the cat nipping at its strings. He was certain of a greater power. He knew that something more was out there. Unfortunately, he was of the opinion that that something didn't have our best interests in mind. And that is when his spyglass focused on Cairo. I'm certain that Egypt needs no introduction, but perhaps a clearer picture of my father's connection to it is in order. It all began during an excavation in the ancient capital of Thebes, when he and his team unearthed a tomb that had not been discovered up to that point. It belonged to a temple scribe who lived during the 26th dynasty, and while it contained beautifully preserved pottery and a sarcophagus, the most intriguing discovery was no doubt the vibrant wall art and panels of hieroglyphics. They described an unknown deity that was worshipped by priests as the god that is not, and they had symbols from other tombs in the region. This led him to other locations that were, until then, not excavated, where he found caches of artifacts and mummified corpses that appeared to have consumed strange concoctions just before their deaths. There were writings that discussed great distances and times, but without context, and in one subchamber of a servant's tomb, my father gained a sense of direction when he found references to Giza. The search that followed took years of his life to pursue, and he was responsible for much of what is known about Giza today, and some of what isn't. The same deity he found in Thebes appeared all over the underbelly of Cairo, and the closer he came to the Great Pyramid of Giza, the more imagery and writings he found that told of the god and its followers. The God of Nothing, that was my father's last research paper, and he poured the latter half of his life into creating it. In his work, he declares that the deity has been given no name, and in fact it was not a god at all, but oblivion itself, and yet it had personhood. It was often equated with Anubis, and it frequently had a place in stories where death was a central theme. There was even confusion amongst the Egyptians when it came to the deity's power. Was Anubis its master, or did he bend his knee to the whims of the god's primordial emptiness? Was he immune to non-existence, or did he too survey the impenetrable, substanceless void like the whole of mankind? In either case, my father believed the final leg of his journey would be reached in the very place I find myself each day, the vault of Anubis. All signs pointed here. Every mural gave him a map to the greatest pyramid of them all. And as for what he hoped to find, I suppose that's fruitless to consider. Because my father, when discussing the god of oblivion in his works, was not hopeful for anything. He only predicted despair. But perhaps I'll record a portion of my father's research at some point. Everything he wrote beckons to be read. It's all so interesting, like a deep well you could fall into and just keep falling forever. Each endeavor he chased was like that, a bottomless pit. And now I'm caught inside of one, though I'm not disappointed by that. In fact, I relish the opportunity to take up my father's mantle and find what's been hidden for so long. It's part of who I am, and intertwined so deeply with the modern Hale family that it's likely how we'll be remembered. That, I think, is something to be proud of. But sometimes I do wonder, if my father was still alive, would he be proud as well?